Welcome to the Good News Mama podcast, a place to get in touch with other mamas, share the load, and know the Lord. Here we aim to lift each other up in the good news of Jesus and the laughter that comes with motherhood. We are a community of mamas just trying to keep the main thing the main thing. I'm your host, Lynn Carter, and each time you tune in, I pray you are encouraged and that you leave challenged and breathe a sigh of relief that you are understood. We were not meant to do life alone, Mama. Thanks for joining in. Let's do this and let's share the good news. Mama, I am so excited to be sharing with you today on the podcast. Our guest is Deb Meyer. She is the author of Redefining Family Wealth, and she is a CPA and a certified financial planner. This is something we have never delved into on the podcast, but it's a very good conversation if the word budget just makes your hair stand on end. It's not that scary of a word, and we actually have a fun time talking about how to navigate those waters of money and basically the what, why, and how about money and how it all relates to faith. So I hope that you'll get inspired as she talks about really discovering your family values and what you're aligning your finances with, and really just giving some resources and tools to make budgeting and planning for your future a not so scary thing. So enjoy the podcast. I can't wait for you to hear my guest on the show, Deb Meyer. Welcome, Deb. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lynn. I appreciate it.
Yes, I'm so excited. So I was excited to touch base with you again because it was great meeting you last fall, and a lot's changed since then in both of our worlds. You just had a move to Florida and all this crazy pandemic going on. So I know things are definitely out of sorts, but I'm excited for you to talk to us about money and finances because that's something we haven't had a chance to really dive into on the podcast yet. And I know I need some help. So give me all the good stuff. Why don't you start by sharing some about yourself and give us some background?
Sure. My name's Deb Meyer, and I am a mom of 3 boys. Like Lynn said, I moved to Florida recently from St. Louis, Missouri, and married my husband, Brian, for 13 years. We really have tried to kind of live this life of, it's not totally unconventional, but it's really living in accordance with your values. And a lot of our decision making has always been about where is our faith taking us, where is our family taking us, and figuring out those are our guiding principles. So that's how we're making our decisions. And I'm trying to share a lot of that message with others. More professionally, I'm a CPA financial planner and the author of a book, Redefining Family Wealth. But I'm truly sharing some personal experiences as well as I give some of this guidance around building wealth in both financial ways and non-financial ways.
Yes. And this is your career. This is like what you went to school for. This was a part of the plan from the beginning, right?
Yeah. So I actually went to college and majored in accounting. I was starting off at Deloitte as a tax associate and worked there for a couple of years, and then realized I wanted to work more with clients on more of a future basis. So forward looking on their finances, not just looking at historical tax returns and things like that. So I transitioned into wealth management, worked at a multifamily office for several years, which is basically catering to families of significant financial wealth and just helping them in all realms of their finances. So anywhere from passing wealth on to the next generation, creating governance structures and estate planning, tax, heavy tax planning, but also just really that comprehensive look at investments and saving for college, saving for retirement, all of those competing priorities. So left that position in 2013, and then I went out and embarked on my own. Started an accounting firm at first, and then now I've transitioned into the financial advisory world. So,
yeah, that's
it's been
awesome.
a fun journey.
Yes. my blood pressure is going up just thinking about all the things that you said, because I know I'm not in order with all of my with all of my
Oh,
investments and things like that. But it can be overwhelming, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on and just kind of dispel some of the myths about money, because I feel like, especially in the state we're in right now with the pandemic and everything going on, there's a lot of stress and a lot of confusion. I mean, I'm talking basic budget problems in my world right now, right? Like just not really um, having an idea about, obviously you don't want to spend more than you take in, but not really, like you mentioned, aligning it with your values and forward thinking beyond, the here and now. So why don't we dispel a couple of those myths about money, because it's not evil, right? Like a lot of people make it out to be. It's a tool, and it's supposed to be wielded in a way that is benefiting us, not owning us, right? Or stressing us
yeah.
out. So I know in the Bible, it talks about in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10, it talks about the love of money being the root of all evil. But a lot of times that gets mixed up and people just say money is evil. Money is the root of all
Right.
evil. And it's not, it's the love of money. So why don't you kind of share as far as what you were talking about with your own personal experience with finances and like stewardship, and just how you're using what God's given you to serve your family, serve God, serve others, things like that. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's been quite an evolution, because I think when I was growing up, we went to church every week, and my parents donated, but I didn't really have a clear view of why they were donating or what was the importance around that financial obligation, but also seeing the volunteer efforts and really connecting the dots. So for me in adulthood, I was trying to kind of figure out, okay, how am I supposed to be using the money that I'm earning to help others?
Yeah.
And in a very direct way, that can be giving, a 10% tithe to the church and to other charitable organizations that I believe in. But then there's also times in my life where I haven't had as many family obligations. So before I met my husband or before we started having children, where we had opportunities to go and volunteer directly on boards or serve in the community at food shelters, things like that. So there were a lot of opportunities that we just, as we've changed through our adult years, it's figuring out where's the best use of our resources right now when it comes to building wealth, and how are we able to do that in practical ways. So for us, at this moment in time with our 3 boys, they keep us very busy.
Yes,
Both me and my husband work outside the home. So we're, we have a very fast-paced lifestyle. So for us, the financial donations are the way that we can give back right at this moment.
Yeah.
But I would hope over time, as my boys are growing older, as we have some more opportunities on weekends and things start to reopen on a more regular basis, that we can give back in those, non-financial ways, but just volunteering our time and efforts and gifts. So
I love that too, because I feel you, girl. I don't got no time. Like, what happened for us to get on this podcast tonight. And we both said that we put that disclaimer out there. Anybody could come walking through the door any second now, because it's chaos out there while they're getting ready for bed. But thinking about kids, you said that you have 3 boys too. What are their ages? You said they're getting older.
Yeah, so my oldest is 10, nearly 11, and then I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. So they're getting to that stage where they're kind of starting to be a little more self-sufficient, but it's definitely still like, okay, I have to do a little more cajoling to go and pursue some of those opportunities. Yeah.
Yes. And so one of the things that I learned from, I don't know if it was the Dave Ramsey, the Financial Peace University, or one of those courses, about the different jars, like the give jar, the save jar, and the spend jar. Yep. Did you guys try anything like that with your kids yet? Because mine are 5, 3, and 19 months. And so it's funny, because when I talked to my oldest about, you earned that money and we're going to see if somebody else could use some of it, or, be giving with it. And he wants to give all of it away. He's just at the stage where he's like, yes, let's give all this. He'll bring his whole jar. Let's give all this to somebody. I'm like, well, hold on a second. Like, that's very generous of you, but you really wanted this thing. How are you going to afford that now if you give all that away? And he kind of looks at me. So did you guys start that at a certain age, or that type of concept, as far as like getting them to know what money is worth? I feel like that's such a belief that we have ingrained in us. How'd that go for you guys?
Yeah, so my 10-year-old definitely, we started that journey of share, save, and spend jars probably, I think, when he was about 6. So for him, it was just knowing that early on, so even before he was 6, if there was an opportunity for him to understand coins and counting, doing that as part of his kindergarten learning experience, that we were really accentuating that piece of it. We weren't trying to really explain like what purpose was behind money, because we just felt like he wasn't emotionally mature enough to understand that. But again, kids have different maturity levels at all different times, and it can be hard to judge exactly when they're going to be ready. So I would say kind of go with your gut and what you know instinctually for your child. But one of the other key distinctions we found, at least with our 3 boys now as they are getting a little bit older, is that there are different money temperaments. There's different money personalities. So there will be a propensity for one kid to be like, yeah, I just want to spend it all. And there may be another kid that's like, I want to save it all. And the third might be, I want to give it all away. So it's just interesting how that played out even in my own childhood. I have one older sister, and she was always the spender and I was always the saver. And we kind of just like kept to those roles even well into our adulthood. So and not to say she's like always spending now, but there's definitely some of those childhood beliefs that you have that are just part of your journey later.
That is a perfect example of how I feel, because same way with me, I've always been more of a saver, more of a like, gotta have extra just in case, and almost like anxiety around that. Not that my parents put that in me. Like, I think it's like what you just said. It's just kind of something temperament maybe that's in us a lot of the times. And it's not that that's necessarily a bad thing. But in your book, you mentioned, which I love, the title, Redefining Family Wealth, A Parent's Guide to Purposeful Living. I wanted you to talk about the mindset shifts related to money, because I think that sometimes we get in the reality that money owns us and we feel controlled by money, instead of the other way around, that money's a tool that we control. So can you speak to that and how that relates to mamas and just the mindsets that you've noticed in your book?
Yeah, I think with a lot of moms, we put that extra pressure on ourselves to be perfect in every way. And our own worst enemies can be ourselves, right? The voices that are in our head that are telling us we're not doing good enough in this respect or that respect. And, money is anxiety inducing for a lot of people. So it's not just you, Lynn. It's really a hard area to come to terms with. And some people are like, oh, well, I'm just bad at money. Like I'm not even going to try because I'm bad at it. But you have to kind of go back and say, well, where did those beliefs come from that I'm bad about money? Like, well, why is that a story that I'm telling myself? And some of it is examination of, okay, well, what were some of the messages that I was growing up with? Like in my case, my parents were both very frugal. So my dad was always saying like, money doesn't grow on trees and turn off the lights to save electricity. Like those kinds of things were always ingrained in my head. And even now I find myself like telling my boys to turn off their lights. And I'm like, okay, we can afford the electricity, but I still it's hard to break some of those habits. So not to say that those are bad habits, but those can be some of the limiting beliefs that we're just saying like, there's not enough. And if you can kind of break free from that and say, there is enough, there's opportunity there. I just have to get past that story that I've been telling myself for so long around it. So maybe having a new mantra around, I am worthy of a brighter financial future. My family is worthy of a brighter financial future. Really figuring out what is that shift from scarcity of thinking there's not enough, that you're not valuable enough, you can't make enough money to pay your bills, have a happy family life, to, okay, I have plenty. God wants abundance for me. There is opportunity here to change what my current situation looks like. And obviously during a pandemic like this, it can be more challenging than not to really shift that in a quick way. So it might take extra time, but I think you can take steps gradually that start with that mindset and then move towards some of the more tangible wealth building strategies.
Hey Mama, it's amazing what a little mindset shift will do. And why are we that way about asking for help? I think mothers always struggle with this. and we don't know how to overcome. But how in the world do I ask for help? How do I reach out when I am overwhelmed and I don't know what to do? Well, go ahead and grab my free resource at my bit.ly link, which is bit.ly/goodnewsmama, ask for help. You'll get the free resource. I'd love to see you use that and tell me what you think. But basically, we're just trying to demystify this thing about being vulnerable, letting our guard down, and asking for help in a real way that leads to peace in our lives and actually builds community with others around us. I love you guys, and I want you to thrive in your motherhood. So go grab that resource, bit.ly/goodnewsmama, ask for help. Yes. That makes sense when you talk about it as far as a deep-rooted belief that you've developed and not really sure where it's from. I don't know. I remember when I was growing up, the way that I would earn. I mean, I never had a real legit job. I did sports a lot, and my parents were happy that I was doing that, and they enjoyed participating in that. And so they didn't want me to get a job to miss out on sports and things like that. So I didn't really work until maybe later in high school. I babysat regularly over the summer and little side things here and there, nothing steady. But I remember at home, I would get $20 for cutting our yard. And when I say our yard, I'm talking more like farmland. It was it was a lot of yard, right? And the mower we had one speed for its high speed, and that was it. So it took me 4 hours to get $20.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. And I think my dad was teaching me a lesson, and I've never told him about this, but it's always been, I knew how long it took me to earn $20 to cut that grass. And so it's always in my head, $20 I'm going to spend that wisely, right? Because I didn't want to be sitting 4 hours on a mower every Saturday to get $20. I'm going to make this thing stretch. And so in my mind, I just started, thinking from there, man, if I had $20, I could do so much with that. It just made me, I don't know, have this belief that I didn't really realize until you just said that, and when my dad would give me money, which he did plenty all the time, he would always give it to me in the form of $20. And it would always remind me, that's how much I caught, so it's kind of like you said, turn off the lights. And Ben does that now. He's like, turn off the lights. So sometimes he'll unplug things it's draining electricity from the wall. I'm like, come on, man. I don't want to plug that in every single time I want to use it. But it is so funny how much things can control us subconsciously and we don't even know about it. Right. And
exactly.
It's very good to have that perspective and to realize that we're not stuck in a limiting belief, that we can turn it around and make it work for us and have a better perspective with it. So that's great mindset shift advice. Why don't we talk a little bit about the abundance mindset that you mentioned? You said that, God wants us to live in abundance and not in scarcity. And I think about there's not this one set money pot that's divvied out to everybody, right? It's coming and going freely, and it's nothing that we have to be scared about, that once it's gone type of thing. So what would you say as far as how the power of prayer relates to that abundance mindset?
Yeah, I mean, for me as a Christian, and I know you're a Christian as well, it's really trusting in God that He is the provider. If you truly have that relationship with Him, that there's no need that's going to be unmet. You are not going to be if you're putting your faith and focus in Him and you're diligent about that, He's not going to let you just go in abject poverty for the rest of your life. There might be trials for sure, but there are times where He shows His faithfulness. I was just talking to another Christian woman earlier today. She's with this group called Unconventional Business Network, and she was just saying how God was already preparing her for this pandemic. They were already making some shifts in their business model and making sure that they could go into this trajectory of more of a virtual environment instead of just having in-person events. Yeah. And He is faithful. I think if you can just put your hope and trust in Him, there's not going to be a time where you're just there's no way out of this.
Right.
someone will appear. There will be some level of assistance. It might be someone that at your church that catches wind that you're in a really dire financial straits, and you suddenly see a check show up at your door, or a nice home cooked meal. Whatever it is, there was never. I think that mindset of like it's never going to be enough is for truly people who don't have that strong trust in God.
I would agree with that 100%. I can think of stories and examples that I've heard too growing up, and friends testifying to God's faithfulness when they've just basically rationalizing whether they should even tithe or not, right? And then they are faithful in that, and they do that. And the same day when they do that, they get that money back and then some. And they, from a source that they had not anticipated, a refund that came in, or something crazy that was just kind of like, God, that was just amazing that you would teach me that little lesson through that, right? Malachi 3:10 that talks about, test me in this, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, and see if I don't open the floodgates of heaven so much that you can't contain it, basically is the gist of that verse. And just like you said, having the faith and having the trust, and that God wants us to come to him like that, with that kind of faith, asking him, what are you going to do, God? I'm actually bringing this to you, expecting, knowing that you're faithful, believing that you want to give me more above and beyond, what I have. And the Bible talks about whoever sows sparingly reaps sparingly, and whoever sows generously reaps generously, things like that. So there's a lot of money principles in the Bible. And I think I looked it up. It was one of the top 2, I think, things that people relate to the most in the Bible is that talks about money, because it's so relevant and it can have such a power over us if we let it and don't realize.
Exactly. Well, and as we said early on in the conversation, that whole concept behind the love of money is the root of all evil. It truly, if you love money as your God, if that is the only thing that you're working towards, that can become just awful and problematic. But if you're putting it in its right place and saying it's a blessing and I can use it to bless others,
right?
There's really not that hang up anymore.
Yes. It's funny that you just said that. It can be really bad and a problem. When I was looking up a few things before we started the episode tonight, I came across the word affluenza. Have you heard of that? I had not. It's like a combination of being affluent and then influenza, right? And so affluent, having money and having wealth and having basically all of your needs met and then some, like you're seeking to get more and more and more affluent, how that can kind of turn into a flu-like disease because it starts to control you and change your perspective. And it starts to, it's not that the money is bad, but it's the love of the money and it's the pursuit of the money more than other things and more than God things. And like you mentioned, not having your values aligned. And it was kind of a spin off of that. It was affluenza. And I was like, man, a lot of us could really benefit from learning about that so we don't fall into that pit, because it really, there are plenty of pits with money that we don't even see coming, not just the love of money, but like we mentioned, the mindset stuff that can really sabotage us and just wreck where we're going, take us off course and put stumbling blocks in our way and things like that. So I thought that was a funny word. I just thought of it right then when you mentioned like it's bad. It could be almost like a sickness. So, okay, we got to get into the nitty gritty on this, because I want you to talk about budget a little bit. I want you to talk about barriers to sticking to a budget, because that's really going to speak to me, especially when you have 2 different people in a marriage and one of them is typically the spender, one of them is typically the saver, and how all that works out.
Yeah. Well, I guess just first on the importance of a budget, it is really crucial because it's a roadmap. And a lot of people think of budget as just a negative word, right? It's like, oh gosh, I have to stick to a budget and there's no freedom or flexibility in that. But there really is freedom. You get to choose where you're allocating those dollars. It's just a matter of having an awareness around where you're at now and where you want to go directionally. So there can be a wide array of budgets. Some people work best on an envelope budget if they're having trouble with their spending and spending more than they're earning. So for them, it's just saying, okay, whatever my income is for that week or month, I'm going to cash that out, put it in physical envelopes into the key things that I know these bills need to get paid. I'm going to have it for rent or mortgage, utilities, that kind of stuff. And then have more of a discretionary envelope that you can do what you went with, whether that's food or entertainment, gas, whatever it is. And then others might feel more comfortable doing an envelope system online. So there's a good program called Envelopes, OPES. It's like envelopes, but with just the M instead of the EN. So that's another form of a budget. And then there's a more detailed budget that you could go into. There's a lot of budgeting tools and softwares, YNAB, You Need a Budget, mint.com. Those are both good resources if you want to do more of an online detailed budget and see where you're at. And it's a good accountability metric too. I've personally used an Excel budget for a really long time. That's just the way my family's worked. That's not as great from a tracking perspective, because then I would have to go back and look through all my credit card and bank account detail. So I just have a general vicinity of what I'm spending on certain things. But I had it very itemized several years ago. Then life got in the way, and I gravitated away from that. But I also know, okay, are we still meeting our savings goals and things like that? So there's a wide variety. I would encourage you, though, if you're really just have no clue where things are going, the idea would be to get as detailed as you can about it, to try to hone in and bring, get more of a rhythm to what each month is going to look like. And it is going to change over time. But even thinking of it in those same buckets as we talked about before, saving, sharing, spending, and that spending could be subdivided into true living expenses and then other debts. Mm-hmm. So you could be looking at mortgage and car payments and things like that in the debt bucket, and then all the other items in the living expense bucket. So there's a lot of ways of looking at it, but I would say it's really important to come together, especially if you're married, and figure out what that family budget looks like. Because if you have your budget, your husband has his own budget, it's really hard to collaborate on like, hey, who's taking care of this bill and who's responsible for that. But if you have that joint budget as a married couple, it's really easy to laser focus and say, we're working towards these goals together. We're here as one in our marriage. We should be here as one in our finances too.
Yes. So there's two things that I think of when I'm thinking of a budget, because we've had a budget in the beginning. Ben and I have been married almost 10 years. And in the beginning, we went through the Financial Peace University as a newly married couple, which was great. Mm-hmm. I appreciated that because it brought some humor to how people operate and ideas about getting on the same page. And so I tried the envelope system in the beginning. Didn't work. I used it fine. Ben, not so much. It was just like two separate lives, but trying to come back. And I felt more like the overseer in a way that was like, hey, did you do this? Hey, I was constantly having to check in with him. How is it going with your money? That sort of thing. And it just became a hassle, and I didn't enjoy that. And then, like you said, life hits and things change. And so now we kind of know about what's going on the end and about what's going out. And we need to get back to kind of a plan like you talked about. But I would say the hassle of having to connect so much just to make sure we were still on budget, to me, that seemed frustrating. But, and then the being on the same page, like maybe one of those apps lets both of you check into that at the same time, because I don't know what that boy's doing. I have no idea what when we're apart during the day, who knows what's going on. And then I'll look at the credit card statement and be like, hey, what's going on over here? Well, see. And so it's funny, but it kind of keeps our marriage a little lighter when we don't talk about money, because we're not super stressed out about it, but it can be stressful if we're trying to be super critical and super particular, which I can be sometimes. I can strain out a gnat, which is awful. So I try not to be that way, but that's kind of how I'm wired sometimes. So what advice would you give for mamas as far as budgeting for the first time, if they haven't done that? Sit down with their partner, look at all their expenses, look at how things come in. Is that kind of the general way that you would go about it?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you tried the envelope system. It didn't work for you in particular, but again, I would start with kind of that simplest budget, the envelope budget. And if that doesn't seem to work and you guys don't have good connection on if you can't make joint envelopes to say like, we're both putting our pay in here and these are how we're doing these things up, then figure out a different tool. So that tool might be going online and like a Mint or YNAB and taking a look that way. Or it might be creating an Excel file that you're just, one of you takes kind of that lead on where are we on the budget? Are we, and not to make it a weekly conversation, but maybe a monthly conversation. And as part of a broader, not just, hey, we're going to have these money talks and exclusively talk about what you're doing wrong and what I'm doing right. Yeah. It's more of a conversation to say, okay, where are we actually coming together? Like, where are we celebrating that this is working well? And then where are some of the areas that we could improve? So what I found in a lot of our communication, my husband and I, is just not leading with the hot button issues. Figure out the things that you can say, oh, this is going well, we're excited, and then like have a small part of that conversation, just where could we be improving? And it might be in finances, it might be in something totally different. So again, you're going to know as a couple if there's a hot button area there. And sometimes it does make sense to bring in a third-party expert. So I'm a certified financial planner. I advise families one-on-one sometimes. And with a lot of families, they come to me because they've had those conflicts at home. They can't seem to get on the same page no matter how hard they're trying. And it just creates more angst in the marriage. So then it's like, okay, well, maybe now is the time to have someone else who has a more objective viewpoint show us where we could be coming together instead of tearing further apart.
That's great, because I was going to ask you as part of our conversation, telling me more about what you do as a CFP, what you help families invest in and toward their goals and defining their goals and things like that, and what that looks like from a sit-down visit with you on the first time to somebody that shows up that really wasn't ready for your services. Mm-hmm. How would we know if we needed to have you helping us, or if we're getting close to having that conversation, things like that? What would you say?
Yeah, I think a good metric is how much have you been able to look into things on your own and try to figure out some of your own solutions. A lot of people like to DIY things. Like if you're doing a big home renovation, instead of shelling out $40,000 to renovate a room, if you can do it for $20,000 and put in some sweat equity, you might give it a go if you feel handy enough, right? Yeah. Same kind of thing with financial advisor. That working with a financial advisor in a one-on-one relationship is going to be more costly than going to some DIY solution or finding there's robo-advisors that you could find online that will invest your money but not necessarily give you all of the comprehensive planning guidance. So there are some more, cost-effective solutions, but oftentimes when those solutions aren't working and you're just not really advancing towards any of your goals, that's the time to really bring in an expert who can help you with that accountability and giving you some perspectives and tools on ways that you might not have realized were even possible before. Yeah. So I guess, when I'm meeting with a prospective client, I often have, if it's a married couple, have both spouses take this 10 to 15 minute test. And it just helps me understand some of their values and beliefs around money before that first meeting. So I get a good feel for, okay, this person's super frugal and the other person's really more of a spender. There's going to be some conflict there that I know in advance I can help navigate some of those difficult waters. So that's part of my process just when I'm working with new prospective clients, and then figuring out, do you have the will and determination to actually make these measurable changes towards your goals? So there's some people that are like, hey, I'm not really happy with where I stand, but it just seems like a lot of work and I'm not willing to to put the time into it. You're probably not going to get that much progress. Just like if you had a workout goal and you don't show up to the gym, it's going to be hard to lose the pounds or strengthen the muscle, whatever. So I guess to just summarize that a little bit, it's really important to recognize that there's an area where either you or your partner don't necessarily have a full grasp of what you're getting into, recognizing that neither one of you are trained in financial planning and you might need some additional outside assistance. and then also having that commitment to make some proactive changes.
It sounds like you should be a CFC, Certified Financial Counselor, instead of a Certified Financial Planner. Have you felt that way? Like, okay, guys, bring it in, right? Because I feel like if you had been and I sit down with you, you'd be like, okay, bring it back. I'm ready. Like, let's refocus.
Yeah, I've had that a couple of times in client meetings where they're like, are you my counselor? Should I pay you for a therapy session?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm envisioning with Ben and Lynn Carter sitting down right there with Deb. Like, let's get all of our issues out on the table here, in a fun way. But no, that's a great advice. So what are some tangible wealth building strategies that you would suggest when you talk about that in your book?
Yeah, so I think we talked about first having that mindset, coming over some of those mindset issues, having that abundance mentality. And then another piece of it is that examination of your values. And if you're married, your spouse's values, coming up with those core values for your family and how that impacts the decision making in your concrete financial plan. So kind of look at it as this 4-step process. First is that awareness around the mindset. Second is the values and creating that family vision. And then the third would be the tactics that we can employ as a financial advisor. So some of the ideas and things that I discuss, especially one-on-one with clients, are, okay, what kind of vehicle should we be saving for retirement? Do we maximize the 401k plan that you have at your employer? Or if you're self-employed, what kind of vehicles are we looking at there? How much are we contributing for retirement versus saving an emergency fund? Or I even have opportunity fund as another cash savings option for clients that might get scared with the emergency and just want to be focusing on, why am I saving this cash? It's not just for rainy days, but what goals do I want to achieve over the longer term? So thinking about, okay, I might be wanting to make a career move 5 years from now. How much do I need in savings to facilitate that goal? Or going back to college, or upgrading to a bigger house. So whatever the situation is, buying your first house. So there's a lot of things that can come into play in that opportunity fund. And then another piece of it too is figuring out, if you have young children, with college savings and when to be directing money towards that. So a lot of these things, it's not all or nothing. It's not like we're saying just save in a retirement account and maximize that. It's saying, okay, we're going to save 5% over here and 5% over here and another 10% over here, whatever, those dynamics. So I think a lot of it is figuring out what those important goals are for you as a family, what you're trying to work towards, and really putting intentional effort around building in those areas. The other piece I would say for just tangible wealth building strategies are really looking at your plan for retirement. A lot of people think of like retirement as age 65, but we're living longer and longer. There might be times where we want to work into our 70s just because we're enjoying the work that we're doing and we're finding meaning in it. And it keeps us sharp and it keeps us active. And I recently read a book called The 100-Year Life, and talking about the kids that are born now, in all likelihood, have like a 50% chance of living to reach 100. And I'm thinking, that's crazy. But they had some pretty hard economic data to back it up. And I'm thinking, wow, that's a whole other ballgame. So these are things to be thinking about, just in terms of redefining what retirement might look like, and knowing that there are going to be transition points in your life. And you just have to know that it's okay to make some course corrections once in a while, especially as a person of faith. You have to trust that God's leading you in certain directions. And I love the idea of pursuing those callings. I mean, one of the main reasons we relocated was to be closer to my parents. And that was a tough decision, because we built a lot of relationships in St. Louis. And I have nearly all of my clients are in St. Louis. So it's a lot of Zoom video conferences and things. So it's been a transition, but for us, it's been a really great move for our family.
And I think that's so important that you look at something as like a living thing, like like a living document. Like the budget is not set in stone at all.
Right.
And each month it can fluctuate. Different needs come up month to month that aren't there other months. Obviously you want to save a little bit each month for Christmas that's coming up at the end of the year. But, different bills that you're going to expect, insurance payments, I know when they're rolling around every year, whichever month they fall and things like that. So it's helpful to be flexible in that, because it goes back to that mindset thing, right? It gets nerve-wracking sometimes looking at it and thinking, I can't do this every single time. But just knowing that it can change, and that's okay. And it's supposed to. And you can change. You can change your mindset. You can change your income. You can shift around how you're doing things. What you mentioned about, allocating into different pots, basically, not just putting it all in one specific place. I guess the benefit of working with someone like you with your expertise is, the rules that go into things, like the percentages on things and the tax deductions versus what benefit you have putting it in there now versus later, taking it out later, the time frame you have to lock it in, like all that stuff is what drives me crazy. I'm like, I just want to be okay. I just want to give somebody my money and just like know that it's going to be fine and not have to think about it, because it can be stressful. But you're right. It's doing what you just did and assessing your values of what do we want. We want to be closer to my parents, and then making those changes when they're hard. It's hard to do something new that you haven't done. And I think that that's a very awesome thing that you guys have done. I mean, I've never moved states away before. I live like 3 hours from my parents, and that's far enough. What would you say is a simple action plan that listeners today could take just to make their current financial status better now and in the future? What would you recommend?
Yeah, well, I think reading my book would be a really good starting point. Redefining Family Wealth. It genuinely is that roadmap. So it's going from A to Z in terms of, creating that mindset shift, looking at your values and crafting that family vision, giving you all of these tangible wealth building strategies and very focused areas. So one chapter is on investing, things like that. If you don't want to read a full book, I do have an email list where I send weekly emails out and just share wealth building tips as I see fit. Some of my emails might not be totally like a linear, hey, this is an exact financial wealth building strategy, but it's really talking about other things that come up with, especially in this day and age, racial wealth gaps and, bringing some of those things to light. So there's a lot of other pieces that I think go into it, and that would be a great way. So both of those resources are available on my website.
Awesome. And what is your website, Deb?
It's redefiningfamilywealth.com.
All right. Awesome. And since you mentioned it, because there is so much going on in our country and with our neighbors and everyone, what were some of the gaps that you were talking about with the racial issues going on? What were some things that
it's I didn't really do a lot of digging until recently with all of the protests and just hearing some of the stories from other friends that are people of color, women of color specifically, and they just their day-to-day has looked so different from mine. I never realized that kind of level of white privilege I've enjoyed most of my life. And I've experienced some gender discrimination before, but never because of my skin color. And from a racial inequality on the economic side, it's been really interesting to investigate just income levels, people of similar income levels, if you're black skin versus white. If you have those same income levels, your net worths are drastically different, like by hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I was shocked to see that because again, I hadn't really thought about the history, but when you think about our country having slavery and when slaves were finally freed, they didn't have any land there was no land available for them to buy. It was all going to the other white Europeans. Right. And land, if you think about just farmers and passing down land to the next generation. I mean, it's a really big source of wealth in our country, even today, that they don't have the inheritances oftentimes. And then on top of it, a lot of, I mean, I was focused more on African-American families, but a lot of them have to go and cater to family members much earlier in their careers. So, someone that might be 55 and at their peak earnings potential might have to walk away from that to care for a family member, and they're more likely to do that. So those were two of the major things that I just found like mind-boggling when I dug into the data. And I'm trying to still figure out how to bridge some of that gap and create more of that experience, because I have served some families of color, and I didn't appreciate the perspective of that until recently when I read some of the statistics and the history behind it.
Yeah, I would agree with having my eyes open on a few things, and even just as far as what you mentioned about the land and inheritance and stuff like that, just the way that people are discriminated against, even if they might have a higher standing, that their socioeconomic status can play into them not getting a loan compared to other people, and background like that, and just the advantages that we don't realize are out there, and the disadvantages for our other brothers and sisters that are facing that all the time. And definitely I have, like you, been looking at what to do and resources and things like that. And I did another podcast with a friend of mine, Ashley Hargrave, that talked about, the diversity and inclusion and mentioning different things, redlining. We were talking about the neighborhoods and stuff, and just the way things are drawn up. And it's really, like you said, we have this privilege that we don't realize that we have. And people look at that sometimes saying, well, I don't have privilege. I wasn't given everything. And that's not what privilege is.
What we mean, right?
It's not, no. Yeah. It's very much the things the advantages we have that we didn't even have to work for, that were just inherently ours, just based on our skin color. And that to me has been the most eye-opening. So it's definitely uncharted territory, but a conversation that needs to happen. Thank you for bringing that up and for having that with me too, because I'm learning and I've got a long way to go. But it definitely is humbling, like you said, and just eye-opening to see what different families go through in different backgrounds. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. And when you shared that about the loan, it brought another memory. One of the women in my mastermind group, she was talking about going by a different name because she was afraid the minute she would put her real name on a job application, she would be turned away. And literally, like, that was how it played out in her life. Like, anytime she would put her real name in a job application, it was just...
Wow.
50% of the time, not even getting a call to have an interview, but she goes by Ty and no problem now.
How about that?
Just amazing.
Yeah.
Not amazing. I mean, it's sad, but it's like, wow, shocking.
Shockingly. Wow. And it's funny because I listened to it was actually from 2017 that Brene Brown had posted on Facebook, and a person from one of my Facebook groups shared it. And she was saying that her first name is Cassandra and her middle name is Brene, and that the same thing would happen because she was raised in New Orleans, and a lot of times people would consider Cassandra a Black name, and she couldn't tell you how many different job interviews she had been in where people would be, oh, I had no idea that you're Cassandra Brene Brown, and she's like, okay, this interview's over. Like, it was very much, she could just sense and tell the discrimination from that just based on those little things. So yes, things that you just don't realize they're there. They're very real. So, and working to change that and change that mindset for sure in our own homes and in our lives. Like you mentioned, your 3 boys, my 3 boys, I definitely feel like it starts there, and having uncomfortable conversations and things that, with family and just opening people's eyes that might feel like challenging in some ways, but maybe just asking them to think on a deeper level. It definitely is worth sparking a change and giving people food for thought, whereas they may have not ever considered that before. So
sure.
Thank you, Deb. I've loved catching up with you. You are so fun. And I'm going to keep you on speed dial, girl, because I got some things I need to know, and I'm going to need to get need to get Ben on the same page. It's not as overwhelming as it seems. It really isn't. And you made it sound so much more simple than in my mind I have it set up, right? Because I can see limiting beliefs there. So I hope that other mamas hearing this know that you're not alone, but Deb knows what she's talking about. So go check out her website, get some tips, check out her book, Redefining Family Wealth, A Parent's Guide to Purposeful Living. Deb, I want to pray for you. How can I pray for you before we close out?
Oh, thank you. I just pray that my family comes together. This move it's had its ups and downs, and obviously as it's just all that's going on in the world, I appreciate prayers for the health and strength of my family going forward.
Absolutely. Let's pray together. God, thank you so much for my friend. Thank you for her heart and for opening up, giving awesome advice and wisdom that we all need to hear. God, I thank you for her obedience in this season of her life with her boys and her husband packing up and moving to Florida and being able to be close to family, just enjoying that time with her parents and being close-knit again and easily accessible instead of states away. God, I just pray for their hearts. I pray for their emotions. I pray for their will as they work through the frustrations of a move that maybe they didn't anticipate. I pray right now for the relationships that she will have and the friendships that she will build and the tight-knit community that she will find through those living in her neighborhood and through her church community, and just ask that you would just bring those relationships to the forefront and highlight those so that she would be able to know who to pour into and who can pour into her and just have that community and that love there. God, I thank you for her heart being willing to go deeper into researching about what's going on with our brothers and sisters in this country and having a heart for making a change there and being able to incite change in others and just becoming more informed and knowledgeable about issues so she can make a change and she can help us make a change. And I just pray for what's going on in her job and her life that she hasn't even shared. You know all those things, Lord, and you want to bless her. I thank you. She knows you're faithful and she's trusting in you for all the things you have in store for her. I just pray right now, believing together, that you would allow those things to happen in a way that is for her good and glorifies you as well. And thank you for this time, and please keep her safe till we meet again. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Good News Mama. If you did, please leave me a review on iTunes. A 5-star review is best, and hit subscribe. Share with your friends on Instagram and Facebook. Please email me at lynn@goodnewsmama.com. You know I love questions. I love feedback. I want to know what you want to know. We're going to talk about what means something to you. So let's hear it. Follow me on Instagram at Good News Mamas. That's mamas with an S. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Keep your head up, keep your heart humble, and share that good news.